This is a quick video just explaining all the little things you need to swap over before you install the P-pump. So let's get right into it. So it's the next morning, and what I went ahead and did is I went and tested the injector lines from the 96 to my 91, and the injector lines, the nozzle that goes onto this male end right here on the injectors are different. So what I'm gonna do is take all these injectors out and swap them into that one, and take these ones and put them in here. And to do that, it's pretty easy. We're gonna have to take this return line off, and I'll show you how to do that. There's just a bunch of 10 millimeters. I got these 3 off so I could bend the side of the way, but they're 10 millimeter bolts on the side of them. 10 millimeter bolt comes out really easy. And once you get that return line off, what you're gonna have is a 15/16 nut that holds the injectors down. I just put a deep socket 15/16 on my impact. Came out pretty easy. Then you just lift that nut off, and there's gonna be a plastic retainer, probably gonna break. Out of the 2 I pulled, one of them broke, so not very good odds. This one seems like it's decent. If the injector doesn't pull out with this nut, all you gotta do is put some channel locks or vice grips on it and pull it out. There's nothing else holding it on. There's no threads on the injector besides up here. They come out pretty easy. It's really not that bad. On my 91 Cummins, I'm gonna pull off the rest of the return line bolts that go into the injectors, and then it loops around back towards the end of the engine, and then comes around to the front to the fuel filter. And when I get there, I'll show you what I do with that. All right, so once we get all the return lines off the other side, it loops around back towards the back of the engine and behind the fuel filter, and I'm just gonna remove this linkage and stuff. That way I have more room. To do that, just take some channel locks, squeeze on this clip, and just push it out. Same thing with this one. All right, I'm gonna cut this dipstick, that way we can get back there. Be easier with this down. Alright, so it's pretty hard to see. I'm gonna zoom in as much as I can, but right on those brass fittings, that's where the fuel line runs from back around the engine. This is the return line right there that I'm pointing to. And then it comes this way, it runs this way along the engine, and then it 90s downward. And where at 90s is where I just showed you, where it meets in right there. So at 90s down there, and it meets into a T-fitting. That big brass piece is the T-fitting. And one side runs up here to the return for the VE pump, and the other side runs down here to this hose. It comes down here, and if you follow it down, it goes back to the tank for the return line. All right, guys, so I got this other fitting out. Just gonna pull it right through. Here it is, that's what it looks like. All these fittings are 1/2 inches. This one sucked. I think you'd be better off not taking that bracket out, that one I just had out, the one I did the first time. If you don't take that out, it'll probably be a lot easier getting this off because it was just moving around the whole time. So if I were you and you're doing this, don't take that bracket out. Take this off first and then the bracket, and you should be able to pull everything out. All right, guys, so once all this is loose and that fitting down there is out, all you gotta do is just lift up on here, grab towards the back, push it around the valve cover. All right, now we're gonna remove the other end of this hose so we can take that hose completely off. So to do that, it's just a 7 millimeter down here. It's kind of a pain, so there's that big power cable coming through. All right, now we're gonna start removing all this harness stuff. So take your oil pressure sensor, take that out, and then I'm gonna unclip the sensor down here. Then what you're gonna do is take some sort of container. I'm just using a Clorox empty one just because I had it laying around. Put it underneath the fuel filter. Fuel's gonna come out of this spout when you push up. That's all the fuel I got, it's not too much. All right, now I'm gonna pull this filter off. All right, now we're gonna pull off. And now we're gonna take this ground off. Over here is just a 10. Also gonna remove this bracket. Yeah, I'm gonna pull this harness underneath the brake booster and keep it over here until I figure out what I need to do with it. Right, and there is a yellow wire back here that leads to something back there. There is a clip. I don't know what that is. I'll look it up, but you just pull it off. It's just a little fitting like this, or a little connector like that. You just pull it right off. So since this had the VE pump and I'm putting a P pump in here, I'm gonna have to move this housing over here. But how that works is I'm gonna pull the other housing off of the other engine and put it on here. This one, I'm gonna pull off of this one and put it back on the other engine. So it's pretty easy. I'm just gonna take this oil filter wrench. I've already broke it loose. It really wasn't too tight. Okay, I'm just gonna turn it like this, even though I'm pretty sure I'm messing up that sensor. It looks like you have to take the head off to actually swap this over because that sensor is gonna be in the way. Yeah, I just heard it break. So like I say, you're gonna learn from my mistakes. I ended up breaking that housing. It should still work. I mean, the pins are good. It's just that clip is broken. The initial time I broke it loose, it spun it. And this piece is separate. So what I should have done is break it loose and then use a screwdriver or some sort of tool to loosen it the rest of the way instead of keep cranking it and breaking that piece. It'll still work, just so this doesn't happen to you guys. Don't do it the way I did it. To take the fuel pump out, there's 2 bolts, are both 10 millimeters. One's right there, and the other one's right there. Before you take the pump off, it's a good idea to remove the lines first. Feed line to the fuel filter is a 9/16. The other end of that line's an 11/16. And then to take this return line off the fuel pump, it's a 1/4 inch on the hose clamp. Then to take the fuel pump out, there's 2 bolts, are both 10 millimeters. One's right there, and the other's on the other side. and then you drop it. Okay, so another hiccup I just ran into. The P-pump will not fit in here with this air intake sensor because it hits it. On the other engine, you can see it's on the top while mine is right here where that plug is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this one off and just rotate it 90 degrees. So this end is gonna be over here. If you look at it on the grid, there's 1 square, 2 square. With my intake, you have 1 square, 2 squares, and then the third square is where the intake is. But you can just flip-flop them around. That way, I have access to the intake temperature sensor on the top instead of on the side. To take this off, it's really easy. There's just a bunch of 10mm bolts. Once you got all the bolts out, go ahead and pop this off. Be careful to try to not get anything in here because it is the intake. Well, I went ahead and pulled this cover off. What I'm gonna do now is put this sensor back on the other engine. But before I do that, I'm gonna take my boost fitting off, which you guys might not have. This is for my boost gauge. And with the VE pump, it references boost from here, but the P pump references it from here. So now I'm gonna have to stretch this out to there. But for now, I'm just gonna disconnect it and leave it on the brake booster or something like that. Now to pull the sensor off. And I'm gonna reuse the intake temp sensor that was on this plate. So I'm putting this on the old engine, and the engine that I'm taking parts from, I'm using that intake sensor. I'm gonna use this plug off the other engine to plug off that spot. This tablet cover will not work for the P pump. I could swap the other one over, but that one's all beat up too. You can just take this insulation off like this. You take all that off, but I'm not going to. I already ordered a new one, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this off real quick. To do that, there's just a couple 10mm. All right, now to take it off. All right, so what I did, stuck my screwdriver in between the block and that tappet cover. I pulled mine up with the blow-by tube still installed. So this is the new tappet cover, it finally came in. Goes in just like the other one came out, just with these 6 bolts. So normally on big long pieces, you want to start in the middle and then tighten going out. So you start with the middle two and then you work your way outwards. On this, I didn't do that because it's obviously not holding that much pressure, so it doesn't really matter the sequence of tightening. This tube is gonna be my new blow-by tube. What I did is I went to Home Depot and I bought, I think, a 10-foot roll of just this tube, and it was all coiled up. So what I did was I heated it up and I put my foot on it. Once I had it in a good shape, I put it in the freezer and froze it for about 5 minutes. It held the shape pretty good. I have 2 of them because there's 2 ports. First tube installed, all I did was slide a hose clamp over it. Next step's to remove that plug. The reason we gotta remove it is to put this oil pressure fitting in there. The VE pump does not require external oil source, but the P pump does. So in the other engine, it went in the block like this. This goes to your P pump and this goes to your power steering pump. But since our power steering pump doesn't require that, I went to a local hydraulic store and I got a cap for this, and it was like 13 cents, So I got that pretty tight in there. And since the fitting is so awkward to get to on the back of the P pump, I already have the fitting installed on the P pump. That way, when I install the pump itself, I just have that line dangling down here and just have to tighten it. Now I'm swapping over the P pump bottom bracket, just 10mm. Like I said before, this is the intake plate from the other engine, but that was intercooled. So the intake horn came right here, but on mine, it's not intercooled. So it has to be like this, because the intercooled version, the intake horn goes right here, but mine comes across right there. So all I did is I flipped it around. The reason I had to use this one is because the air intake temperature sensor is up top and the other one is right here. So that's why I had to do that. So I just got it painted up and the gasket came in. Now the intake plate's on, I'm just gonna plug it up. Now we're gonna install this block off plate really quick. I'm gonna reuse the stock gasket. That's it for all the random little things to swap. The next video will be putting the P pump in. Thanks for watching.